It all began with the Noon, a primordial ocean of chaos, a maelstrom of nothingness. The Noon raged and raged, yet none existed to hear it. Save one. A being called a Tomb, or Ra. Now Ra was a paradox, for he both existed and did not. He was but a formless consciousness floating in the Noon. But Ra had one major problem. My God, I'm bored. He was bored, and so he thought to himself, I should do something. But what? There's nothingness over here, there's nothingness over there, and I don't even have hands to distract myself. Wait, that's it. Hands. And at that moment, Ra had an idea. A peculiar idea and a novel one. It would require all his strength and was quite dangerous. But Ra's boredom could not be contained. And so he closed his eyes and focused his power. The Noon shook, and Ra trembled as a great object emerged from the Noon. Land. Ra had created land. And to use that land, Ra gave himself hands. But alas, Ra looked around and still saw nothing. So he took his two hands and placed them to the ground. He grabbed the dirt and whispered to it. Now what Ra said, none can say, but the effects were miraculous, for when Ra threw the dust, something beautiful happened.
What the fuck? There's sand everywhere!
Ra created life. Two beings, Shu and Tefnut. They would be his children. And like all children, they were mischievous, unpredictable, and curious, for they looked upon the dark waters of the Noon and remembered their father's words.
Do not, under any circumstances, go into that water.
And so Shu said to Tefnut,
We should go in those waters.
As they decided to walk into the Noon, despite their father's orders. They walked here and there, exploring pretty much everywhere. But eventually, Shu and Tefnut began to notice something strange.
Shu, have you noticed literally everything looks exactly the same? Now that you mention it, I do feel a bit turned around. Can you remember where we're going? Can I remember? That was your job. Have you been leaving the jelly bean trail? Well, yeah, but I might have ran out like 4 eons ago. Oh, Christ. We're lost.
Shu and Tefnut became lost within the waters of the Noon. But back on the surface, Ra was none the wiser, for he sat in ponderous meditation, unaware of the passage of time. He simply witnessed his thoughts and sank deeper and deeper into contemplation. When suddenly, a great cry rang out, a cry that could have only been
Shu,
his children. And with only 2 places in existence, Ra knew what they had done.
Those idiots have ignored me.
They had entered the Noon, and clearly based on that cry, they were lost. But Ra looked out with his 2 eyes and saw no solution. So he turned his gaze inward and knew exactly what he must do. He plucked out his eye and sent it forth to find his children, giving it life and purpose before heaving it into the waters, where the eye began its long and arduous search. It checked north, south, east, and west, yet all directions looked the same, meaning sight, the eye's central purpose, was useless. And so the eye used its ears as it began to hear something in the distance. Faint murmurs and whispering souls, and with only a handful of living beings, Ra's eye knew who it must be.
Bullseye.
As it sprang into action and followed the noise. Left, right, each step amplifying the sound. And soon enough, Ra's eye grew wide as it made it to its destination. For it was Shu and Tefnut, lost in the unfound. So the eye scooped them up and brought them to their father. And for the first time in this universe, joy was had. For Ra hugged his children and smiled, turning to his eye and saying,
"You complete me."
As he grabbed his eye and put it back into its place. Yet in that moment, something unexpected happened. Something peculiar, never seen before. Ra's eyes began to produce water, large droplets of godly tears that dropped off his chin and smashed into the newly made ground. And from those tears came life.
Holy f***, it's cold.
Humans and beasts of burden. And so Ra decided to give them their own home, their own land. So he looked around and pondered where best to place these new creatures. Perhaps he should put them in the Nun, or maybe devour them. But alas, Ra decided to confide in his children. And so he turned to his 8 beautiful sons and daughters and said,
Wait. I thought I had 2 children.
Ra did in fact only have 2 children. But his children apparently had their own children. And their children had even more children. In fact, his children's children were currently making more children right in front of everyone. And they refused to stop. To which Ra said,
That is enough. In this family we procreate out of necessity, not pleasure.
But Ra's grandchildren could not understand. And so they said,
So, I can't have sex with my sister?
Correct.
That seems pretty dumb. I mean, watch this. Hey sis, yeah? Do you want to have sex with me? For sure. See?
Ra's grandchildren refused to separate. And so he said,
Fine. You leave me no choice. From this day forward, you and your sister shall be separated. And between your bodies I will place the humans and the beasts of burden. It's done!
Ra forced his 2 grandchildren to separate, and in the space between he placed the humans and the beasts of the world, thus creating the earth. It was perfect. A great home for Ra's favorite creatures, the humans, who although flawed proved quite impressive. They built great cities and learned many new skills. They were violent and unpredictable, but that's what made them so fun. And best of all, they all worshipped Ra. The humans knew who gave them this dominion, and they never forgot. Or at least, not yet. For after many generations and years untold, Ra began to notice something disturbing.
What the f*** is that?
The humans began to worship other gods. False gods. It seemed with each generation the memory of Ra faded from humanity. They forgot who gave them the earth and who filled up their plate. Now Ra was a kind god and generous. He loved humanity, but this sacrilege could not go unpunished. And so Ra let out a great cry. And to those on the earth, it sounded but like an earthquake. But to each and every god, it was unmistakable, for it was the summoning cry of their father, their grandfather, Ra. And so all the gods heeded his call, Isis, Osiris, Thoth, and more. But it would be Set, Ra's most chaotic grandchild, who would propose a most devious plan, as he requested something unthinkable from his grandfather Ra.
Your eye. My eye. Yes. To punish the humans, I need an object of great power that is imbued with your anger. So I know an eyeball seems like a lot, my lord, but I swear that... Oh! Jesus! Here you go. Could you at least give me a heads up before you rip it out? Here, give me that. What is my purpose? To kill my child.
The god Set promised his grandfather Ra that he could sufficiently punish the humans. But first, he would need Ra's eye, for it contained Ra's anger, but more importantly, much of his power. And so the exchange was made. Set whispered incantations to the eye, dark incantations, and from those words, Ra's eye transformed into something horrible, something terrible. A woman. Her name would be Sekhmut, and she was vengeance personified, a spirit with one purpose: to destroy humanity.
Everybody, I just wanted to take this moment to tell you all how much I love you. My daughter Cleocama, my son Ramses, and of course, my wife Linda. Without all of you, life just wouldn't be worth living. Do it myself.
Sekhmet descended upon human civilization, a specter of doom with one goal in mind: bloodshed, as she began to decimate the human population, and none were spared. She killed the old and slaughtered the young. It was terrible, unfathomable. Yet within the ocean of blood, but one thing could be seen: the smiling visage of Ra, for his anger with humanity had yet to be placated, as he said, "More." And so Sekhmet continued her rampage, and continued, killing thousands, perhaps millions, in the name of Ra. But with time, Ra's smile slowly began to fade as he looked down upon the bloodshed and, as if sobering up, began to realize the horrible decision he had made.
What have I done? I've made a huge mistake.
The destruction of Sekhmet became too much, and so Ra called upon her, his bastard daughter, and said,
Sekhmet, you've done well, but it's time you take your place beside me.
But Sekhmet would not listen, as she said,
No.
as she continued to rampage across the countryside in direct defiance of her father's orders. Her bloodlust knew no bounds, and so the gods once again gathered, and Ra asked for advice. It seemed Sekhmet wanted one thing and one thing alone: blood. And no being, not even the all-powerful Ra, could contain her addiction. And so, like all addicts, the gods decided to use her addiction against her. And they would only need a few simple ingredients: some wine and some red dye, as they simply mixed the two ingredients and then set out to solve this issue. As he found Sekhmet and said,
Sekhmet! Sekhmet, over here! I've already told Ra I'm not done killing. Oh no, it's not that. We all just thought, given all the murdering and stuff, you may be quite parched. I don't drink, Set. It makes for sloppy murder. Oh, it's not wine. It's 100% unadulterated human blood. For when you get thirsty. Jars of blood, you say? That seems perfectly normal to me.
The gods tricked Sekhmet into drinking wine disguised as blood. Sekhmet drank and drank until finally she passed out. And then the gods surrounded her and began to cast various incantations. And by doing this, they removed the spirit of vengeance from her. And when Sekhmet awoke, she was completely transformed.
What? Why are you all looking at me like that? And why don't I want to commit murder?
And from that day forward, Sekhmet became a protector of humanity. She would use her battle prowess for good, and good alone. But she was not the only god who'd changed. For Ra, realizing his grave errors, decided his time as ruler of the gods had come to an end. And so he looked at each and every one of his incestuous grandchildren and said,
You. Me? What?
As he pointed at Osiris and gave him the crown of the gods. Now for many years, Osiris looked at the people of Earth, teaching them many things: agriculture, beer making, and gaming. Great was Osiris's reign, but alas, like all reigns, it had to come to an end. For Set, Osiris's brother, desired the throne. He believed it was his right to rule, and so he devised a devilish plan.
Ladies and gentlemen, who wants to party?
For Set would host a party, a huge party, and everyone was invited. Gods, creatures, spirits, everyone. It was electric. But this was only the beginning. For after hours of drinking and dancing and all sorts of shenanigans, Set pulled out his final party trick.
Everybody, I haven't just called you all here to have a good time. I'd like to reveal the great challenge.
Set revealed a most mysterious object, and the guests became quite curious, saying,
Is that a tomb? No, it's a sarcophagus. Isn't that the same thing? No, a sarcophagus is used to hold a coffin, while a tomb is more of a vault. Who cares? Fine. It's a tomb. And I'd like to play a little game. Whoever fits perfectly into the tomb gets to keep it. What do you think? Can we just keep dancing? So, who wants to play?
And so Set had all the guests line up to try and fit into his specially made sarcophagus. First Isis, then Thoth, even Sekhmet tried. But alas, none had the correct dimensions. But one guest had yet to try.
Osiris, come, my brother, and test out my sarcophagus.
And so Osiris entered the sarcophagus, and...
Oh my goodness! I fit perfectly! Hello? Hello?
Set trapped Osiris in the sarcophagus, and from here he tossed it into a nearby river and let it float into the unknown. Set would take his brother's crown and become king of the gods. For now. For Isis, the wife of Osiris, refused to give up hope for her husband. And so for many years she searched for Osiris. She checked here and there, pretty much covering the entire earth. She could sense him, feel his presence, and the closer she got, the stronger that sensation became. And after scouring the lands of Egypt and the mysterious Middle East, Isis came to a tree and knew she'd found her husband.
Osiris.
So Isis chopped down the tree and found her husband's tomb. Osiris lived. Barely. For his body had atrophied, and he was weak to the touch, to which Isis exclaimed,
Osiris, my love. Everyone told me that you would be lost forever, but I never gave up. That bastard Set thinks he can keep you from me, but he never will. Not even if he chops you up into 14 pieces and spreads you across the globe. I'll never give up. I love you, Osiris. Osiris? Osiris, are you even listening to me?
But in that moment, Sept leapt out of nowhere and cut Osiris into 14 pieces. He then proceeded to hide each body part across the known world. And once again, Isis made the terrible trek around Egypt to find all the lost pieces of her husband. Under this rock, in that cave, in this museum, and once she retrieved her husband, she used a magical spell to bring him back together. And it worked. But alas, Osiris was barely alive, more of a corpse than a god. And so Isis, his sister and lover, decided now, with Osiris's time short, it was the perfect time to say,
let's have sex.
As she had sex with Osiris before he passed on to the underworld. But this final act of Osiris would prove fortuitous, for after a few months, Isis became pregnant. Pregnant with a son, a challenger to Set for the throne of the gods. So to protect her son, Isis would birth him in secret and raise him away from the lidless gaze of Set. The son's name would be Horus, and after many years he grew big and strong, learning in the ways of magic and warfare. Horus was driven by a single thought: revenge. Revenge for his father. Revenge for his throne. And so when the day of reckoning came, Horus would leave the shelter of his mother and seek out his uncle Set.
No, I said I wanted the food on the left and the drink on the right. Can't you people do anything right?
I'm sorry, sir.
It will never happen again. Oh, I know it won't. Guards!
Sir.
All the guards are already in the dungeon. Damn! I guess I'll have to do everything by myself. Who the fuck are you? The name's Horus, Uncle. And I challenge you to a duel.
Horus would challenge his uncle to a competition of wills for the throne of Egypt. They would engage in various challenges, and whoever won the most would become king. They battled as hippos, they raced ships, and they entered in nearly countless competitions. And yet, at the end of all, Horus stood victorious. But Set, in his anger, refused to be undone, as he unsheathed his sword and said,
I challenge you to a death match.
As he looked to kill his own nephew, and thus began the battle between Horus and Set. Sword met shield, shield met sword, and the two seemed to be equally matched. But Set, devious as ever, refused to be undone, as he pulled out, perhaps, his most disgusting trick.
Wait. Pause. I think I got something in my eye. Come here, Uncle, and let me have a look. We can kill each other later. Yes, nephew. Take a look at this!
As he threw sand into Horus's eyes, who fell back and stumbled to the ground. But just as Set leapt to draw the killing blow, he blew out his knee, and in his great pain he yelled,
Ah, my fucking knee!
And thus Horus would become the victor. Set would be banished to follow in Ra's footsteps, and forevermore Horus would rule. Until he got bored and gave the throne of Egypt to Thoth, who ruled until the time of the Egyptian kings. And from the kings came the pharaohs, all the way down to present day. And that is the entire story of the Egyptian gods. Kind of.